Hi, I'm Tim Enriquez with the Fantasy Book Ranking System, and in today's series we are going to check out the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. So it's 3 books. I've got 2 here. One of my buddies is borrowing the first one. That probably says it's reasonably decent, but these are the first. These are the 3 books in the trilogy. I'm going to review the trilogy as a whole. I found the books to be pretty similar and not really worth discerning one among the other. For those of you not familiar with the fantasy book ranking system, basically the idea here is to help you, the reader, decide if you want to read the book. So I'm going to do that by ranking this book against other popular books. So if you've read them and say, hey, you like it and he likes it too, then it's probably something you want to check out. If we happen to have different tastes, well, go ahead and stop watching. I don't know what to tell you. But hopefully you'll find that things are pretty similar. Reviews on Amazon, you can never really tell whether you even like what the person says, so it's hard to know exactly the best way to do it. I'm also a little bit selfish. I'm a writer myself, and so I'm trying to figure out what kind of makes fantasy writing tick, to do that to help myself out as I kind of dip my toe into the fantasy writing world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank the books on a scale of 1 to 10 through about 15 different attributes. 10 will give you an idea of what kind of my favorite or best book in that category is. 6 or less kind of sucks. 8 is kind of middle ground, pretty decent as we go through. And then I'll also describe some elements of the story to see if that's things that you're looking for. I'll give you some flaws, some strengths, my overall impression, and we'll end with the book's own unique FABR score at the end of the whole thing. So first, let's start with this. So First Law Trilogy, how epic is it? It's a pretty broad, sweeping series, so this is a 9. It's definitely a solid, covers lots of characters, lots of lands, and pretty big impact in the world. So a 9 overall. Not quite as big as Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, but definitely up there. How well written is it? This guy has a very unusual writing style. I could see some people giving it a 10. I could see some people even giving it a 7 or 8. I did ask myself the first 100 pages, I was like, man, do I want to keep reading this? The writing style is unique, but as I got more into it, and I think he found his own writing kind of voice a little bit better, it got better and better. So I'd still give this a 9. I thought it was a strength of the book. Not quite as good as Name of the Wind or Game of Thrones, but pretty good. How real did it feel? Here, this guy shines, and so Abercrombie and Fitch is able to make these characters and the fights and the war and everything just seem super real and nitty-gritty. So if you want real but yet fantasy, if you want them to feel like you're there instead of kind of watching a movie in your head, then this gets a 10, and this is the litmus test against all others. And any 10 is usually pretty rare and exciting. What lessons are taught? I'd say 8 overall. There's definitely some lessons imparted, but at the same time, you're kind of wondering exactly what's going on. I don't feel like the author is trying to preach at you. So there's kind of, some interesting lessons in there, but it's definitely not like, oh, I'm going to change my life because of the way I read this. Still a kick-ass story, though. Is the book a page-turner? Yeah, you want to find out what's going on, and the author will alternate, basically. Every chapter is the viewpoint of a new character, and then it'll cycle through. So you can have 3 main characters that he kind of cycles through, and so you want to then read, okay, what's going on with that next character. How memorable is the story? It's definitely up there. Pretty cool story. Lots going on. Reasonably memorable. I read this about a year ago, and so, but it's definitely pretty memorable. It's going to I think, stay with me for a while. Certainly parts of it. So that's definitely a strength of the story. How memorable the main characters. The main characters are pretty cool. They're each kind of unique. They're definitely memorable. You remember aspects of them. You can kind of hear their voice long after you've stopped reading it, which I think is pretty awesome and a testament to the author. So reasonably high score. Honestly, the big negative is, and we'll get to it in a second, but the main characters aren't necessarily likable. So they're memorable, but they're not necessarily likable. I personally prefer likable main characters. Secondary characters not as memorable. So there's some in there that are kind of interesting, but it's not. I don't think people are just going to stick with you like, oh, that character, for 20 years. There's no way I can forget that guy. I don't think that's a strength of this book. It's a little bit of a weakness. You do want to read that next book, and so you finish one, you want to pick up the next one. The story is, only complete when you have read all of them, so you do definitely want to check all of them out. So it's up there, not quite as good as Game of Thrones in my opinion, but good. The book, because of the way it's written, unique writing style, cool, real, gritty feel, it would definitely be rereadable. You could definitely enjoy reading that again, even at a high level. So that's a 9, a very strong score. He wants to blend what is good and evil. There's a lot of different kind of, well, what your perspective is. This person has good in them and evil in them. So if, some readers really like that, especially against the stereotypical fantasy, the murkiness. But that's up to you. But it definitely blends it pretty well. It's pretty murky for what's good and evil. Relatively low magic too. There's elements of magic. Sometimes they can use it, sometimes they can't. The world itself is relatively scarce of magic, and even the main characters are not able to use magic too often. So it would be definitely on the low side for this. Something like King Arthur, Game of Thrones, along that line. What age is appropriate? There's a lot of swearing, there's torture, things like that. So to me, I'm pretty lenient. I'd say 15 or above. I also don't think it would be good for younger readers just due to the writing style and the complexity of the language. It's not just so hardcore like Game of Thrones, where they're just going to use some of the worst words or real kind of that kind of brutal stuff. But it's pretty up there. I could see somebody wanting to make it a little bit more mature, especially with some torture scenes thrown in. Is the series finished? Yes. Massive bonus points for finishing the series. So you can start it today, you can read all 3 books, and you can be complete and not have to wait years and wonder what the hell's going on. So yes, the series is finished. So flaws, the biggest thing to me is those main characters, while cool, were just not likable. It's a lot like The Sopranos, where the characters are, they're memorable, you think about them, but you don't really want to be like any of them because they all have massive flaws, at least in my mind. The writing style is quite unique. It could definitely turn off a few people, but it is, if you're looking for something new and different, it definitely has a unique way of putting things together. The lessons learned didn't stand out, I think because he's trying to be so murky with the good and evil. Those lessons learned, at least for me, didn't stand out the whole test of time. I personally prefer a little more clear good and evil. And then the ending itself isn't a high note, satisfying ending. I mean, it's definitely an ending, so you're not like, what the hell, like, was there going to be another book? But it's just not necessarily like a Star Wars feel-good, ending. Some readers may be looking for that. So my overall impression, I definitely enjoyed it. High level, really cool perspective, and how you really felt like you knew the voice of those 3 characters, and they were different enough that it almost felt like 3 different people wrote it. It had a super real feeling. This is my number 10, my litmus test for other books on the real feeling. Your unique writing style, which was pretty refreshing. It is complete, which is awesome. There's really no big flaws to take away from it, just a few minor flaws to just knock it down a peg or 2. Personally, I just wish there was a character where I was like, oh, I really want to be like that guy in there. I personally look for that. You may or may not. So overall score, 92. Pretty high score, pretty badass book. One of my all-time favorite completed trilogies, top 3 for any completed trilogy in my book. And so 92 is pretty awesome. Really an excellent book. And if you enjoy fantasy, you got to give the First Law trilogy a whirl. If you want to check out other reviews, check out my website, Tim Enriquez, or keep watching this YouTube page. And we'll have a bunch coming. If you think I'm an idiot or disagree with me, go ahead and let me know in the comments, and I'll tell you why you're wrong.